My name is John Diamond. I'm the president and executive director of the University of Maine Alumni Association. And thanks for joining us for our virtual gathering today. It's the fifth in a series of presentations and discussions that the Alumni Association has been hosting over the past 2 months on issues relevant to UMaine alumni. This morning, our topic is about being Black in America. Specifically, but not exclusively, the topics of anti-Blackism, the killing of George Floyd and others, and the Black Lives Matter movement. It's a topic of national importance, and this webinar is intended to help all attendees better understand and acknowledge the life experiences of being Black in the United States. We have 3 panelists today. All are UMaine alumni. They are Dr. Shante Delalue, who is Vice President for Institutional Equity and Inclusion at Brown University. Jojo Oliphant, who is a restaurant owner in Belfast, Maine, and he is also a member of the Alumni Association's Board of Directors. And Jean Point DeJour, who is a real estate investor and property manager in the Bangor region. We're also joined by Dr. Joan Farini Mundy. She's the president of the University of Maine and its regional campus, the University of Maine Machias, and she'll be sharing her thoughts following the first part of this morning's program, and she'll be also participating in the Q&A. We're going to begin with a few questions, some of which some of you sent in advance of the webinar, but we'll also have a Q&A session later in the discussion. If you'd like to ask a question, there's a simple way to do so. On the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little cartoon-like speaking bubble. That's the chat button. Simply click on that, type in your question, and click enter or return on your keyboard. We'll address as many questions as possible during the time we have available. And also, so you know, we're recording this session and we'll be making it available online. We're also going to be making it available on a resource page on this topic that we're adding to the Alumni Association's website. Okay, so let's get started, beginning with the killing of George Floyd 3 weeks ago. And we'll start with you, Dr. Delalue. What was your initial reaction when you heard the news?
First, let me say thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Given the topic that we're engaging in, I want to say that this is my personal experience, my lived experience. So in this moment, I'm not representing Brown University. I'm representing myself and my thoughts and feelings around the issues that have really been illuminated, have been around for a long time, but brought to a national stage, given this most recent killing. So my initial reaction, honestly, was pain. As a mother of 2 Black children, to watch a man die publicly is not normal. In the 20s, you know, our country really had an issue with public lynchings. People would actually use postcards to celebrate the deaths of Black men in particular, but Black people, children included. And so as someone who studies race, has a lived experience around race, I identify as African American, it really touched me in a personal way that nothing has really changed. The way in which people, Black people in particular, are being killed has changed. But the fact that it is still happening and we're in 2020 hasn't changed. And so I remember feeling numb, feeling sad, and actually, in a way, discouraged that others around me seem to be a little desensitized in the moment, right? We're dealing with COVID-19 and others who work in higher education, you know, we have to figure out how to open in the fall, but that we couldn't take a moment and stop and think about it. Now, of course, days passing, we all are talking about it. We're having webinars, we're engaging with our neighbors, with our families. But that day, I remember the next day wondering, will other colleagues say anything? Do they care? So that was my initial reaction.
Thank you. Jojo, how about you?
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to speak here today. Um, I know some of the questions they're easy to answer, but it was pretty difficult to come to get the answers because a lot of people know me that I like to put things in the rear view mirror and not bring them up. Uh, because I've dealt with a lot of the issues that we're going to talk about today, and but my initial reaction, the first thing I thought was, here we go again. I was heartbroken. I was outraged. I watched that video countless times, and some people say they can't watch it. Um, they only watched it once, but I just couldn't believe that. Like Shante said, 2020, we're still dealing with uh, black men losing their lives when they're already in custody, when they're in, you know, people's hands where they're supposed to protect us. Uh, I can't believe that other officers sat there and watched what was going on and nobody intervened. It's just, I was enraged. My blood was boiling, and I just thought to myself, why didn't somebody else that was standing on the street try to get involved and prevent this from happening? These are my initial reactions. These were the first things that I thought about. Then the next thing I thought about is, I said, based on what I've gone through in my life, I said, that could have been me. That could have been any of my friends. And, how would I feel? I think I feel the same way or if I ask the question to the members that are listening here today, it's like, how would you feel if you had to stand there and watch your daughter, your son, your loved one get murdered in the street for no reason? Those were my initial reactions, and it's.
Yeah. Thanks. Gene, how about you?
Yeah, so first off, I do want to thank everybody for attending this webinar and everyone that put this together. I think my initial reaction was, before I even saw the video, I did not even want to watch it, because in the back of my mind, I already had an idea of what I was going to see. And so I really did choose not to watch it for the first couple of days, until I saw the video of what was going on before George Floyd was on the ground. And to me, it looked like he was being arrested peacefully. It didn't look like he was putting up a fight. So I couldn't make the connection between what happened between that first video and the second video, where he is literally begging for his life. To me, I couldn't make that connection. So I wanted to watch that video. And when I watched that video, I think the two other speakers have stated, the feeling that I felt was, I was angry, first of all, because there was a man's life being taken right in front of me. And it just felt like that man was very helpless and there was nobody there to help him. And it really just sparked a nerve within me, because immediately after that video, I thought about, kind of like what JoJo said, is the people that were there that did not intervene. And I thought about, if that was me on that ground, who would intervene for me? And that's something that really, that it really hurt me in a way, because when I scrolled through social media, I felt like a lot more of my Black friends, my minority friends, were talking about this situation and trying to take a stand, whereas my white friends, people that I've gone to school with, were kind of, they might have mentioned it, but they weren't really talking about it, or they just dismissed it completely. And, you know, for me, I felt hurt because, you know, as someone who's been in the state of Maine for the past 7 years, I'm up here without my parents. I'm up here without my siblings. I don't have any close cousins that live up here. So, you know, the family that I made in Maine, this is a family that I know up here. So to think that no one, you know, was actually fighting, no one actually cared enough to do something or say something, really, to me, really hurt. And it also highlighted a bigger problem. And the problem was, whenever there's something like this that happens, a lot of people, for whatever reason, whether it be that they're uncomfortable about the situation or that they feel like it's not their problem to deal with, they go quiet. They don't talk about it. They pretend like life is okay. Meanwhile, you know, there are, you know, hundreds of people who are dying in the streets, and we're just neglecting all of that. So my initial reaction was, of course, angry. And then my second reaction was just hurt at the amount of people that were just quiet about the whole situation.
Well, let me ask you about that. In the time since, in the last 3 weeks, there's been a huge public outpouring of anger, public demonstrations, vigils, a lot of activity, a lot written. What's your reaction to the demonstrations that we've seen? How do you interpret what's happening and how it's being depicted? Those are two separate questions, I think, but I'm interested in hearing all three of you. Let's start with Gene.
Yeah, so my initial reaction to the demonstration, I was encouraged in a way, because especially up here in Maine, it was very encouraging for me to go to a protest in Bangor and to see not just a few Black men and women that live in the state of Maine out there protesting, but it was also, you know, white people, Spanish people, people of all race, gender, wherever they're from, they were out there protesting. So in a way, I felt like there was some solidarity in regards to that protest. And I also felt the anger that many people, many Americans feel, where people are like, you know, this is enough. How many times do we have to have protests to the same issue that we've been having for years? You know, I felt that same anger from the people that were protesting. And so it's very encouraging to see that people are coming together, but it's also discouraging to see that this is not the first time that we've done something like this. This is not the second, this is not the third, not the fourth, and I can keep going. It's just, how many more times do we have to keep doing this before people start listening and real change start happening?
Jojo, how about you? How do you feel about what you've seen in the demonstrations?
My initial reaction was, you know, I wish the protests were peaceful, but you know, I'm not going to try and tell anybody how to protest things. Yeah, I wish there was no looting and people losing their lives from the protest. But, you know, to me, it seems like people are committed to, you know, maybe this is the straw that broke the camel's back, and we are tired of seeing these things happen. You know, the violence is inexcusable, but, you know, if you go back to 50s during Martin Luther King, I mean, they had peaceful protest and it was the same results. So, you know, you're fighting the same fight. So whether you're peaceful or not, you know, that's how they want to protest. That's how we want to protest. But I'm all about a protest, but you know, I don't think the violence is the key to solving some of these social injustice. And you know, sometimes when it's violent, it may fall on deaf ears. We hope that's not the case, but you know, like I just feel that people protest in a different way, and you know, it's good to have protests right now.
Thanks. Dr. Dello, you?
Thanks. I think I have a slightly different view. First, it's important in all of this, from my vantage point, right? I work in education, I study race, and I have my lived experience. So I look at the demonstrations very similarly to Kimberly Jones. So there's a YouTube video, you can find it. It's titled, "How Can We Win?" So I'm gonna paraphrase some of what she said, but so a demonstration has three components. There are protesters. So those are people who are passionate about a very serious issue. And in this case, imagine that people were willing to risk their lives with the COVID-19 pandemic happening in order to save their lives. So just let that sink in. People were willing to risk their lives in order to save lives, okay? So those are protesters. Then there are rioters. Rioters are people who are anarchists, they damage property, they don't care about other people. I think we all can agree, there's over 300 people on this call. I think we can agree rioting is not good. People shouldn't damage other people's property. But you have to, oftentimes in these moments, we think about peaceful protests, but we don't think about some of the later work of Martin Luther King, where he said, rioting is the language of the unheard. So instead of, I think, for me, I try not to pass judgment, but I try to ask questions. Why would somebody be so full of anger that they would burn something down? What would get you that upset that you would damage property? There are people who are instigators, don't get me wrong. They look for opportunities to just cause trouble. If we took those people out, and I believe there are good people who get to a point where they just can't take it anymore. The third group are looters, right? So you have people who smash windows and they go in and they grab clothes and food and shoes. And one of the things Kimberly Jones said is that is really evident of the fact that there is such a wealth gap in the United States that people would be willing to go through a broken glass to grab some bread, to grab a t-shirt, to grab sneakers. What does that say about our country? That people want to have materialistic things so bad that they'd be willing to bust through a window during a protest to get goods. So really we should be looking at asking questions around what is the wealth gap? How did it get to where it is? And not just the income gap, because the income gap is very different than the wealth gap. The wealth gap looks at assets. What do Black people in the United States own? Not individuals, but as a race, Black people, compared to white people. It is some of the estimates of economists today are saying by 2040, by 2050, the Black economic wealth will be at zero to the white races housing in terms of assets and goods that are owned, right? That to me is indicative of a problem. So when I see the protesters and the rioters and the looters, I'm asking questions about each of those three groups. Why did they make that decision to go out there? Why did they make the decision to do whatever it is they did? And what does it say about our society? What does it say about the things that we need to change in order to make this not a situation where somebody would burn something? Now, the last thing I'll say, and I might have gone over my 3 minutes, is, because this is a big one that comes up often. Our country has a history of rioting. We tend to condemn rioting when it is done by marginalized groups, right? We see rioting happening after a football game or a hockey game. Oftentimes, those individuals are predominantly white, right? It's a celebration. They're burning cars, they're smashing windows. But when we say, you know what, we don't want Black people dying in the street senselessly anymore, we're gonna go out and protest, riot, and loot, it is all lumped in as negative. So the first thing that we have to do is separate out what is the people who are doing something that they shouldn't versus those who are out for a good cause. And also question why when certain people riot is fine, but when other people riot, it's a problem. We could probably spend the whole webinar talking just about this, but I know we have a lot more questions to go.
No, thanks. We will get
John, if you
back.
don't mind, I do just want to add one more thing.
Sure.
I believe that people deal with trauma very differently. And what you're experiencing right now is how people are dealing with the trauma that we as Americans, we as Black people in America have faced for the past 400 years. And people are tired of it. I remember when I was a kid, sometimes I would hold things in and I would hold it in and I would hold it in, and then finally I would just punch a wall, and that's exactly what you're seeing on a more grand scale. People are traumatized. They've grown up in a world where we're told that we're criminals, we're told that we're lesser than, we're told that we're not as smart, we're cut from resources such as counseling when we are traumatized, such as therapy and having somebody to talk to. And so now you have all of these people who are out on the street who are angry at the injustice that's being served, and they don't really know how to properly deal with the trauma that they've experienced. And so some of that comes out in the form of peaceful protest, but some of that is also going to come out in the form of rioting and looting. And, as much as we can say that that is wrong, I think the biggest thing is asking, why is this happening? And we'll realize that there's a much bigger issue than what the media is trying to display. That's all I wanted to add, John.
I'm glad you brought that up, Gene, because I think it's really important for everybody participating in this to understand what it's like growing up Black. It's likely that a majority of the people who are participating in this webinar are not Black based on the demographics of our alumni base. So I'd like to hear from all three of you, but we'll start with you, Gene. Share what it was like for you growing up, family, school, friends, the discrimination, the exclusion, the lack of opportunities, but probably lack of opportunities you were afforded compared to your white friends.
Yeah, sure. I'll just start off by saying I didn't really have any white friends until I went to college. But I want to say this first and foremost. I was born in Haiti. And in Haiti, I didn't know I was Black in Haiti. I'll put it like this, because when something happens, we don't describe somebody by their skin tone. We describe their height. We might describe the way they walk. We might describe the type of accent they have. But to say that someone is Black in Haiti and that's who you're looking for, it's like looking for a specific hay in a haystack. It's almost damn near impossible to do. So I didn't realize that my Blackness was an issue until I came to America.
How old were you then? I'm sorry. How old were you?
I was about 5 when I came to America, 4.5, 5. I was right on the border.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I wanted folks to know how old you were at that point.
Yeah, so I came in the States at about 5. And, growing up, I never really thought of it of this is a Black versus white, or this is a racist situation, because the environment that I grew up in, that was just my mindset, was what is going on is the way that it's always been. And that's just it. But as I got older, I started to realize that, some of the things that happened to me and some of the things that I've heard my friends talk about is in fact a reflection of a system that is set in place to hold people of color down. I think back to when I used to go to high school, and I walk in through the building and there are security guards and police officers at every door with metal detectors patting us down and going through our bags. Mentally, that tells us a message as young Black men growing up in America. That message that we're receiving is, we are criminals and we're preparing you to be criminals, and that was the message that I received in high school, going to school every day. But also I can recall a time when I was walking to the park. This is my own personal experience, and it's kind of when I started to really not trust the police officers, or really not rely too much on the system. I can remember a time where I was freshman year of high school, might have been the summer leading into freshman year of high school. I was walking to a park, and an unmarked police vehicle started following me really slowly, just a couple feet behind me. And, after a half a block, I stopped and I looked at the two officers in the car, and I asked, "Why are you following me?" And to which the officer replied, "Because I want to." Now, I don't know what it was about me, a freshman in high school, that made that officer felt the need to follow me. I don't know if I seemed like a threat to him, but he followed me for a half a block, or a little bit longer than that. And the only thing that was running through my mind during that time was, okay, this is an unmarked vehicle, and it could either really be the police officers, or it could be someone who is waiting until I get into a dark enough alley to shoot me. And it was a very situation to be in as a freshman in high school, because I had one or two options. I could have ran, which would have given that officer a reason to run after me and arrest me for no reason, or I could have just continue walking scared and hope that that is actually an officer and not someone who's aiming to shoot me at the next, dark street. And that's something that my story is just one story of multiple Black Americans who grow up in places where police are constantly harassing us and constantly telling us that we are criminals, and constantly telling us that we don't have a future other than being in jail. And that's what we're tired of. That's what we're tired of.
Jojo, how about you? How does your experience growing up compared to what Gene just described?
Okay, my experience is, I've experienced some of the same things from Gene, but I just want to say, for an hour and a half discussion of my percentage of experiences, there's not enough time. But, I'd like to make no mistake about it and I want to make this very clear. I am blessed for the place where I live now, the things that I've gone through, and I love Belfast without a shadow of a doubt. I love the family that I have, and I love everybody in this community. I love their support. I'm overjoyed with the experiences that I've had, and the gratitude that I have for the people here is, to me, it's priceless. But in my life, it started when I was in third grade. Because I was born in Chicago, then I moved to New York, and I moved to different parts of New York. But once my dad decided we needed to move somewhere safe, I basically started going to predominantly white schools. But then that's where I learned I was always the minority. And, I didn't understand it until I had run-ins with police, and when I got into high school, I've had friends, I've had people that I tried to date, have their parents tell me that there's no way that you're gonna date my daughter because all you ends are just gonna be drug dealers and crackheads. So, there's absolutely no way that it's gonna happen. I mean, I used to hear the N-word as if it was, like a third name, like a fourth name, and, growing up, it was, at first it was hard to hear, because you're like, what is going on? We're learning these things in school, and, here I am being a civil person, but there's always somebody trying to tear you down or name call or disrespect you, in a way that you're uncomfortable. And in high school, like my older brother, he's only a year and a half older than I am. I'm the third. But my older brother used to always say, well, hey, you know, if people want to disrespect you and they want to call you the N-word, and you know something's going to happen, you always tell them, hey, when you see it N, you smack them. And so I knew right then and there, once somebody thinks they're going to put their hands on you, then I could just go back to what I learned prior to the schools that I, you know, predominantly white schools. Because, you know, first, second, third grade, I mean, growing up, you know, you gotta fight for everything. You gotta fight to keep your shoes, you know, you gotta fight to get your lunch. And it was, you know, back then it was just something that was normal. You know, third and fourth grade, things changed, and it was actually fourth grade, things changed, and I'm like, whoa, I could go to school and eat cookies and, you know, hang out with people that I don't typically hang out with, and I really don't have to fight. But, you know, in high school, it was, you know, I went to a high school where there was, you know, there was only 10 black kids in my graduating class. And, you know, so it was a totally different experience, going to predominantly white schools. But, you know, when I was in school, I felt that people, like, not many people know that I have a learning disability. And, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm reading stories, I'm reading things 4 or 5 times, and I said, man, I can't understand this. What is going on? You know, and I'm writing numbers down. Sometimes I'm writing the numbers backwards, and, you know, whatever it may be. And I talked to some of the teachers, and they, you know, they always shook it off to the side, because in school I was a pretty good athlete. So they just, oh yeah, don't worry about it. But my dad had brought it up to the school that, you know, hey, can you get JoJo tested, because you know, I think there's something wrong with him. My school never wanted to test me, which, you know, if I were white, I think it would have been an easy test for somebody to do. You know, they didn't want to use the resources to have me tested. You know, which is, you know, and I never say that, you know, people are racist or anything, because I don't know what people think, but I just feel that if I were white, I would have had those tests provided. I would have had some of the struggles that I had going through high school. I wouldn't have had those struggles, because they would have been able to address those things. And, you know, once I went to prep school, which I was fortunate, you know, like I said, I have a dad that was, you know, he was committed to making sure that we lived a different life than some of the other people that we grew up around, and, you know, the places that we left, and possibly the way that he grew up. And once I went to prep school, I was able to have those issues addressed, and, you know, it was countless hours of me, like, learning all of the stuff over again that people typically learn in school. When I was young, my friends and I, we'd be walking to, you know, to and from school, wherever we were coming from, playing basketball or just going to the park. We always dealt with police officers, you know, pulling us over, or, you know, we're just walking, jumping out of their cars, throwing us up against walls. You know, hey, where are you ends going? What are you doing in this town? Which, you know, it was crazy. And that, you know, now that I look back at it, and now that I answer some of these questions, you know, it's unfortunate that people don't really know how it is to be black. But it is it's definitely, now that I'm, 43 years old, it has made me the, the person that I am today. And I've always been committed to not falling victim to, oh, poor me, poor this, poor that. I learned to become very fast at a young age. Unfortunately, Gene says they talk to the cops. If I saw a police car, listen, whether I had to run 2 miles, 10 miles, nobody was catching me, and it was just, it got to the point where I didn't need to be doing anything. I could be standing there waiting for a bus. If I saw a police officer, I'm, make sure my shoes are laced. But those are some of the experiences that I've had in high school, in growing up. And, it's unfortunate, but at this point, I'm glad I went through it because of the person that I am today. So, yeah. That's going to do it, John.
Yeah, thanks. Dr. Delalue,
Sure.
you're female. How was your experience, similar or different from what Jean and JoJo just shared?
It was different, and I think it was different for a number of reasons. One, I grew up in New Jersey. I think Gene did grow up in New Jersey as well, part of his life. So the family I grew up just is a strong Black family, right? So no qualms about it. People could think whatever they wanted. I can remember the first time I was called the N-word walking to the park, so it's very interesting. So there's a similarity. Me and a group of friends walking, and a car rolled by and they yelled it out of the window. And I remember my family not being afraid to have conversations about race. My mother grew up during the race riots in Newark, New Jersey in the 60s. So they had lived experience around mistreatment, not only by the police, but just by other people. So I'm happy to say I have had and still have a very strong Black women in my family who helped shape who I am. So I'll go through these things quickly, but in school, I was in gifted and talented in first grade. So it was identified that I was really smart or had certain abilities. But I noticed that and this was as a child, I noticed this, the white students were treated a little differently. So in my town, the town was segregated. There was literally a railroad track. And on one side of the town, most of the Black people lived. And on the other side of town, most of the white people lived. And there was some sprinkling of both in between, but for the most part, it was segregated. So when you got to middle school, a few less white students were in the school. And by the time you got to high school, there's one high school in the town, and there were practically no white students. So what was going on? All the white students went to private school for high school. In high school, the books were tattered. They were 10 years old. My sister is 7 years older than me, and there was still text from when she was in school. Were rarely updated. Guidance counselors told me when I got accepted to the University of Maine, you shouldn't go there. You should go to community college in New Jersey. You'll never make it in Maine. So I asked why, and they said, well, because you have an attitude. And that was code for you're Black, you're too pro-Black, and you're going to the whitest state in the country. And so you won't make it there. And that actually fortified in my mind that that's exactly where I needed to go. And I believe that that's the case. So I agree with JoJo that I don't take back anything that I've experienced in my life. I think every door that was open and every door that was attempted to be closed was for the good of what was supposed to happen. And so as it pertains to discrimination, one of the things I found is I know I've talked to a lot of people, and my own experience is that sometimes because the conversation of racism and discrimination is so uncomfortable that we find ourselves trying to make people feel okay, right? it's amazing to me that Black children even get into a socialization of apologizing for racist people's behavior. No, they actually need to be held accountable, though racist people, for their behavior. And there's guilt that comes along with that. People will often say, well, I'm not racist. And it's like, we have to actually understand what that is. So we'd have to go back and look back in the 1700s when the German folks and French individuals were classifying humans. They were classifying other things too, but they classified, and it was a hierarchy. And that idea was brought over to the United States and the founding of this country. And so I would say, unfortunately, racism is embedded in the way that we do business in the United States. And the only way that we can undo it is to have these conversations, be honest about our experiences, not make excuses for people who've pretty much done what they've been socialized to do. So one quick example, I was in college my second year, I think, was going home, 8-hour drive from Orono to New Jersey, stopped over in Rhode Island to see a friend who grew up in Rhode Island, went out to a dance club that her uncle suggested, and that night changed my life. Several of the bouncers who were white beat me up, called me the N-word, spit on me. And why? Because my skin is Black? So no, we have to stop making excuses for this abhorrent behavior that is rampant in the United States, and allow people who are experiencing these things to go through different emotions, right? So often, so one of the things that's set apart in terms of I also identify as a woman is not to be too angry. I remember a professor said to me, can you stop talking with your hands because it makes your classmates nervous? Well, what about me talking with my hands makes somebody nervous? No, it's because my skin is brown is what is actually making them nervous. So let's really dig into that. Why? Where does that fear come from? Because the fear is what perpetuates the issues that we see that get blown up on a national scale. And the only reason why we know about them and are tackling them, I believe, is because they're being taped. So they've been around, right? The first slave probably predated this, but that's documented was in 1619 in Jamestown, Virginia. Here we are 401 years later, and we're dealing with the same things. And so it's time now. So, my experience is one that is blessed without doubt, but it's a troubled experience. I was a first generation college student. My mother had a disability and wasn't able to work. And so I worked really hard. I've been working since I was 14 years old to help pay bills in the house. And I've never taken a break since. And I'm not going to take a break now. This is the time to roll up our sleeves and really reckon with this issue that has plagued us for 400 years. And because it's been around since the founding, we're not going to change it overnight. And we certainly won't change it in this 90-minute conversation. But we can begin to be honest and self-reflective around what it is we can do.
I think this makes a good point to transition to the theme of Black Lives Matter, because there's a lot of misunderstanding and mischaracterization of what that means and what it doesn't mean. Could you address that?
Sure. I've heard all kinds of things about Black Lives Matter. If I were able to do a poll, right, of everybody on this site and say, have you heard of it? I think most people would say yes. Where did you hear about it? That's the key question. Usually it's through social media, through other friends, through family. Most people haven't actually gone to the Black Lives Matter website and researched the organization, right? So a part of our education is these sound bites in the media that doesn't give us the full picture. So the Black Lives Matter movement was started by 3 Black women who really, after Trayvon Martin's killer, if you remember Trayvon Martin, he was the young man, 17 years old, who was gunned down in his neighborhood, walking down the street because a local vigilante felt like he shouldn't be there. That was a moment for me that is embedded in my heart and my soul. When I was pregnant with my son, I remember I opened up the envelope and it said, "It's a boy." And the first image that came to my mind was Trayvon Martin. When you're carrying a baby, it should be the first moment should be joy, not, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to teach this young man how to navigate down the street so he doesn't get killed. And so Black Lives Matter to me is an important fixture in the United States work to dismantle racism, okay? To dismantle anti-Black racism specifically. Those women who stepped up, they've been ostracized, they've been called names. The organization has been likened to a vigilante group. All these things aren't true. I mean, you can look it up and see what it is for yourself. Now, they have 40 organizations that are all across the world, not even just the country, the world, where people take up this work and really work hard at a grassroots level to try to figure out, how do we do this work collectively? How do we stop the trauma and pain that's been inflicted in Black communities for hundreds of years? And so what I would encourage everybody to do is look up the organization for yourself. So the next time you're engaged in a conversation and someone says, well, I saw on CNN, or I saw on Fox News, or I saw on MSNBC, this Black Lives Matter movement, and they're causing all these riots, I would encourage you to go and look up the information for yourself. Individuals make decisions. I think organizations have to be able to separate themselves from the individuals. And so this organization, unfortunately, always gets, not always, that's not fair, sometimes gets labeled as negative, but we got to ask ourselves why too, right? The other piece of it is, and I don't know if, John, you're going to ask this question later, I'll stop there.
Well, we do want to get back to that, and I want to get to some questions, but I would like to take a break. So because we have President Perini Mundy with us, and I think issues pertaining to your experiences growing up as panelists, as UMaine alum, are important to the university community, looking back, looking present day, and looking forward. And I'd like to ask President Perini Mundy just to give your thoughts and your reactions to what you've heard today and what you've been working on.
Sure. Thank you, John. And thank you to all three of our panelists, to Dr. Delalu, to Jojo, to Jean. This is an incredible discussion. And I expect that when we get to questions and answers, this will continue. But I want to thank everybody for taking this time. You know, with George Floyd's death, my first reaction was horror and anger, followed quickly by reflection. And I reflected kind of in two places, and I just wanted to share a little bit about that. I had this thought about my kids, our three children. I thought, how are they reacting? Because it's important to me to know how they're reacting, to know something about what they've taken from being our children for these years. You know, there was this sense of a little bit personal. Have we done the job we needed to do with these kids to be sure that their reaction is horror and anguish and a need to take action? And then my next thought, another thought, I don't know the order here, but was to do with being the president of a university. A university is an institution of higher education. It's about the future. It's about what shapes the nature of our country in such an important way. And in this job, you know, the sense of sort of, what am I doing? What are we doing at this university to combat anti-Black racism, to be a place of inclusion, to be a place that can have the discussions we should be having. We're an institution of higher ed. And then just this week, a Chronicle of Higher Ed article with the headline, "Higher Ed's Toothless Response to the Killing of George Floyd," which took me aback again. And I thought, the whole institution of higher ed is not doing what it needs to do here. So I tell you that I know that Dr. Delalu is here in her personal role, but I have read what her communications have been like at Brown University and so many other places. I'm looking I'm fully committed here at the University of Maine to changing this narrative in our university. We are the whitest state in the nation. That's been mentioned here in Maine. I came from working for a decade in Washington, D.C., and found the transition here actually somewhat difficult because of the change in the nature of diversity in my colleagues. And yet I have found willingness here for us to open the conversation about racism at the University of Maine to a new level. And it's an imperative. No question that we must figure out how to do this well. And so I can't promise and won't to not misstep here, to not say things that will be not well received by multiple groups. But I ask you all, as I'm looking at the number here, I'm seeing 352 participants. That's a lot of people who care a lot about the University of Maine, who care about our future and our young people, and the lessons that we need to shape for and with our communities today. More important than ever that there be an explicit, direct focus on what structural and systemic racism mean in institutions of higher ed and what it means here at the University of Maine. Because one thing that's for sure, it's here. It's a part of this university. And so our job as educators and people who care about our university is to understand as much as we can how we got there, but more importantly, how we move and what we do now with the generations of young people coming through our university, specifically what we do with and for and together with our Black community here in the university, and move ahead. So, John, I don't know that I have a tight and tidy sort of prescription for what we do, but I have to be clear about how very troubled I have been over these past weeks and how very hard I've been thinking about how, as the president, I need to, with people who will help me figure out how we move ahead, how we listen and understand the differences that we have on this campus, and how we, frankly, change the perception of the University of Maine as being a place that is, it's a reality that we are a largely white institution, but I think we have to be a place that is clearly an anti-racist, anti-Black racist place. So a little bit more of a request back out to all of you for your ideas about where we go, but you know that I'm ready to lead in that direction.
Thank you. In the questions that have been submitted so far, there was a question asking our three panelists to talk about what it was like at the University of Maine. What was their experience? There have been a few allusions to that. But in the context of what President Perini-Mundy is talking about in terms of tackling this, I'd like to hear what things you think the university should be doing to move that agenda of hers and the public agenda forward. Jean, can we start with you on that? Any thoughts based on your experience? You're the most recent grad.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't know what the university should do. I don't think that I'm the right person to make those suggestions. I'll put it like this. I think in life there are things that we want to do, there are things that we need to do, and there are things that we have to do. I want to be able to own real estate. I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to live my life and be happy. I need to be able to have a job that can sustain myself, my family. I need to be able to take care of my health. And I need to make sure that, the people around me are healthy. But in this situation, I feel like I have to speak. I have to speak up, not because I'm particularly knowledgeable about the situation, not because I'm an everyday activist and, I spend 24/7 studying the law, studying what we should do and studying what's right and what's wrong, but because as a Black man in America, I feel if I don't say anything, then my silence is in a form complicity, and it's saying that it's okay that these things are going on. So I am speaking as someone who has grown up in the system, who has seen what is going on in the Black community, and I want my voice to be heard. I don't think I'm the right person to tell, anyone what the changes should be. If someone has an idea, and they want to bring it up to me and say, what do I think? Then I can give my own personal perspective, being that I am a recent graduate, and I can have somewhat of those experiences. I can kind of relate and say, knowing the demographic at the university, I think this approach might work. I think this approach might not work. But I'm not the right person to be asking to ask that question respectfully. I think if we are serious about that question, then we need to bring true activists. We need to bring people who are actually studying this, people who are studying the laws, people who have spent their life trying to figure out a solution to the problem. We need to bring those people in and have a whole separate discussion. That's not a discussion for me, respectfully.
Dr. Delalue, this is your area. You're doing this at Brown. You are working with the president there to guide their policies. What could we be doing at UMaine? What should we be doing?
Mm-hmm. So let me start first by saying quickly, my experience at UMaine was a mixed one. I went through many feelings of anger, frustration. My first roommate was afraid of me because I was Black. But then there was bright spots. Representing the university in DC, sitting down in a meeting with the governor, working with the student affairs leadership team, SALT at the time. And so what I think the university can do, there's a number of things. One, this is what I think I heard and what Gene is saying, and I don't want to speak for him, but you have to have a task force with the appropriate people represented, right? I can remember being very vocal at UMaine, and often there not ever being a Native American person at the table. And that always puzzled me. Old Town Penobscot Nation was less than, a mile or two down the road. And so today we're talking about anti-Blackness, but if we're talking about diversity and inclusion broadly, you have to have representation at the table. If those individuals are not at the university, given the demographics of the state and of the school, well, then pull in other people. We can't make the excuse when there is no people. One, you have to look at hiring and recruiting. Who is being admitted to the university? What is the commitment around diversity and inclusion as it pertains to your students and your faculty and your staff? Again, people do the whole, Maine, the country, right? I think over 60% of the country is white. And so every state institution could probably say that in many places, right? That's not an excuse. I made a decision to go to Maine, so we can't decide that people of color don't want to go to Maine. They do. People want opportunities and experience. So don't take that away from people. Now, the only way you can do that is to do trainings, right? So we need to understand unconscious bias. They understand microaggressions, because the last thing you want to do is recruit people and put them in toxic soil because they won't grow. And so you need to, it's like a simultaneous process. You're recruiting people, but you have to retain them, which means you have to cultivate the soil. You have to turn it over, whatever that means, whatever that looks like. That means that the people who are there need to get prepared. The demographics of the United States are shifting. If you look at K through 12 numbers, we are moving in a direction, and Maine has to be ready. My experience used to be, I love Maine. When John called me, I was so happy to be a part of this. But my experience was Maine was about 20 years behind all the time, whether it was music or whatever. And so we got to catch up. We have to catch up. And so how are we working with the Somali population after the refugee resettlement in the Lewiston, Auburn area, right? So there are communities in Maine that we should be reaching out to, and not once or little not one-time deals, but sustainable goals. The university, if it doesn't already, needs to have a strategic plan specifically around diversity. And I'm glad that the president is here. That is an indication that this is important. For some presidents, this topic isn't important. So I know the schedule of a president. For her to take the time to be here and spend this time today, that's a testament to where the university can go. And so I'm here and willing to help in any way that I can. And we have to confront, I think the president said this, systemic racism. We can't talk about it as individual incidents. It's not that one thing that happened that one time, or, we don't have that in Maine because there's not, sometimes it's easy to say it doesn't happen in a place because you don't have the numbers. So we have to broaden that perspective. It happens, believe me, it happens in Maine. And I'll close with this. Usually, absent having historically underrepresented populations present, people will find another group. So the French Canadians were the group for a long time in Maine that was discriminated against. So discrimination exists. We have to and then tighten up our policies. So how do we hold our community as an institution of higher education? We shouldn't be into policing people, but we certainly need to have policies that hold people accountable for their behavior. Mm-hmm. And collect the narratives of alum. I'm in touch with a lot of alum Black women who went to the University of Maine, are very successful, and could speak about their experiences. Do we capture those stories and then share them back to our current students so that they know you're not alone, that they know that you can make it, that we know what you're going through, right? So I think we need to tighten up the relationship between alumni affairs, particularly the alumni of color, with the university. Mm-hmm.
Thank you on that. I'm scrolling through the questions that have been submitted, and I want to try to present them in as consistent and a role as possible to follow up. And one of the questions here was asking, excuse me for the pause, it says, many white people want to be allies and stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and other causes of importance to people of color, but they don't know where to start and at times make unintentional missteps. A good example would be a white woman holding up a sign that says, "I can't breathe," at a BLM protest. What are the first steps that you would suggest so that white people can be better allies and fight anti-Blackism? And I should, I'll direct that to Jean, and then Jojo, and then Dr. Delalue.
I'll direct it to Jojo because he's been taking a break and I want him to talk.
Okay.
and then I'll answer.
Okay, thank you.
Honestly, John, when you called me to do this, my initial reaction was I didn't want to do this. But then I just, I talked to my wife, and then I just prayed about it for a quick second, and then I said, yeah, I would love to do this. But I'm gonna lump these last few questions, about Black Lives Matter and how things were at the University of Maine together. And I think the thing that comes to my mind is, until our generation, generationally acceptance of social injustice changes, and people start standing up for humanity, and make it a point to say Black lives do matter, the news will continue to be the same, and they will continue to report the headlines that they report today. But my commitment is to, to tell people to do something. So for instance, police chiefs, when you have police officers that have these violations, or what as the people see as violations, or when you're reprimanding an officer, how does it get to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 times before somebody does something? For someone to say that Black lives don't matter, driving a car with, okay, so say for instance, driving a car with me, like right now, when I go to University of Maine events, my wife doesn't even know this. She's always asking me to drive. I don't drive when my family is in the car with me, because I'm so used to getting pulled over and harassed for no reason. I choose not to do it. If it's not nighttime, I don't drive my family anywhere, and that doesn't sit well with me. Some of the things that I go through, it's like the color of my skin matters, right? And people are afraid of it. I hope there's a day where I can drive somewhere or I can go somewhere and the color of my skin doesn't matter, that I'm not fearing for my life because I am Black. It is a tough place to live at times when you're traveling. Like when we were traveling to New Jersey, I've been pulled over 3 times on the trip to New Jersey, and it's like, hey, what am I getting pulled over for? This is absolutely ridiculous. When I had a Florida license plate, being pulled over because I'm passing the police officer, and he looks at me and then he circles back around and he wants to harass me and ask me where I'm going. The same is on campus. There's been times where I've been talking to public safety, and Coach Cause will attest to this. It's like, they're asking me simple questions, and next thing you know, they got me surrounded, they got me outside, and they're surrounded with their guns out. And here I am, I'm on campus. I will never forget those days. And if Coach Cause didn't give me his cell, because at the time I didn't have cell phones. I mean, this is 20 years ago. He said, "Hey, call me and I'll come pick you back up from public safety." If I didn't have his cell phone, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation over simple issues. And this is, the University of Maine's police are the same police that are in Orono, the same police that are in New York. I mean, if growing up, there's racism everywhere. And like I told my wife the other day, I said, if you have a racist child in school, it's not like that kid goes through school and then all of a sudden they die. What do they become? They go to school, they go to college. Next thing you know, they become police officers, lawyers, judges. So until our society as a whole, stands up for humanity, I mean, I don't think we're going to see change. It's great to talk about this now, and hopefully we can do something to change lives for other people, because my daughter, I'm committed to make sure my daughter doesn't go through this stuff. I'm hoping that it would never happen to her, but you know, I'm a smart guy. I know that it would. I know that some of these things would happen. Same as Shantae, you know, it's, it's the way that I was raised. I always said to myself, with all of the police encounters that I've had, I said, I never want something at the end of my name. So for instance, my name is Jojo Oliphant. I don't want to say 3 counts of possession of cocaine, 3 counts of possession of, you know, whatever it may be. I've always cut my hair. I've always shaved. Like I wouldn't wear pants that had holes in them because I'm not that guy. But I shouldn't have to do that. You know, it's just, I don't know. This is, you know, I could tell all you guys this today, but like I could not answer question number 8, 9, and 10. And I woke up at 3 o'clock this morning and I started to answer these questions, which I've had these questions for how long, John? I mean, since Monday, probably, right? This is the first time I've cried since August 27, 2008. And the reason I know that date is because my daughter was born on that date. And like, I don't even know where to go for change. But, you know, my roommate texted me the day after George Floyd's death, murder. He texted me. He says, he's like, hey Joe. He's like, you know, Garrett. He's a white guy. He said, hey Joe, I just wanted to say that I love you, bro. I'd do anything for you. I know the color of my skin is different, but I can't imagine what you've gone through to get to the point where you are today. He says, I'm a better person because I know you and because you're in my life. And that sums it up, because when I was at the University of Maine, we would go to the mall. He's driving. Like I never wanted to drive anywhere. He would be driving. We'd get pulled over, and the cop comes to my door and he wants to see my ID. You know, and hey, what do you need my ID for? You know, there were times I used to sit in the back seat and there's the 2 of us are in the car. I'm like, hey man, let's just get to where we're going. I'm sitting in the back. Like, there's a lot to be done, but I don't know where to start with what the university needs to do. But I know one thing that got me really tied up was when 2 weeks before I was getting ready to graduate, they told me that my African Studies class doesn't count towards my degree. Now, people that have played sports at the University of Maine, that we have people that make sure our schedules are on point for us to graduate. They make sure everything is right so you're eligible to play. And they dot their I's and cross their T's. I love Maine without a shadow of a doubt, and I would do anything for the university. When they told me that day, that's when I started to realize, before this whole Black Lives Matter movement started, that we don't matter. When they said, I said, well, what do you mean that class doesn't count? It was like, yeah, no, Black history, we're not counting that. And I'm going to stop there.
Wow.
You guys still there?
Yeah, powerful. And look, we had several questions that came in that, Jojo, you just addressed in many ways about the treatment related to the university and in the communities beyond Orono itself. I don't want to skip over that whatsoever, but I think you did an eloquent job of addressing those. one of the questions that came in while you were speaking was, and it's for all three of you, how has your experience with the healthcare system been? How does anti-Blackism fit into your own personal experiences when you've sought healthcare or your access to healthcare?
I can start, and I'm just one point of correction. So it's anti-Black racism. So just in case someone wants to look it up after today, to have and I think we're going to work with John and his team to put together a list of resources. So to that last question, what can you do? I have some resources that I'll give to the team to make available to everybody who was here. Because the first step is critical self-reflection, doing the work within and with our families, and then going out from there. So in terms of healthcare, I mean, if you look at COVID-19, disproportionately is killing Black people. Why? Because of health disparities. So if you look at research on health, Black women are, with terminal degrees, have worse maternal health outcomes than white women with high school diplomas, okay? So that tells you, even after you go and get more education, that will not prevent racism from embedding itself even into your health, right? There's a lot of research that also looks at the impact of racism on mental health, on physical health. And so my own experiences, I had some trouble with my eyes years back when I was in Maine, and went to see a doctor. And he said, "Oh, you must be from the South." And I said, "Well, if New Jersey is the South, then yeah, it's south of Maine, but it's not the South in my mind, but whatever. I don't know what that has to do with what me getting my eyes checked." And he said, "Well, you know, a lot of Black people have, you know, this might sound crazy, but this is what this person said to me, STDs that get into their eyes." And I thought, what? This is a physician, this person. And I thought, I'm here because when I was little, I had reoccurring conjunctivitis. So one of my eyes have scars from just having conjunctivitis a lot. But it was just telling to me that he lumped me in a group. Black people are not a monolith, right? If, as you've heard from me and the other panelists, we have different lived experiences, different ways we experience the world. Unfortunately, we all experience discrimination. That is one thing that threads our lives together, and that's unfortunate. And so I think in terms of health, it definitely impacts our health. We have to do something about it. So it's killing us. That's serious. When I talk to my colleagues about COVID-19, I've lost a family member. I had two other family members, three actually, who had COVID. Family in New Jersey talk about bodies being stacked up at funeral homes because so many people have died. What is happening there? And so we need to engage the public health and the medical community to have a serious conversation around how do we start to tackle the health outcomes of Black people in the United States. It's a big problem.
How about you, Gene?
Yeah, so
your experience?
one thing I will say is I'm fortunate enough to be young and fairly healthy, no major health issues that I'm aware of. And so I've been very fortunate in that regards, in the fact that I'm not in and out of the health system like other people are. But with that being said, there are a couple of things that I do want to touch upon. And one is something that not only impacts Black people, but it also impacts all Americans if you go to a hospital or any healthcare facility. And it's the price that you pay for going to any one of these systems. We can all agree is sometimes outrageous, it's ridiculously high. And you know, even well-to-do people struggle paying off medical expenses. And so when you look at that, and then you look at an inner city neighborhood or a Black neighborhood where people can't get jobs because they have felons. People can't get people don't have the financial means to take care of themselves. When people are struggling to eat, when my dad has to take a whole day off of work to take me to a doctor's visit because the lines are so long that it's going to be at least 8 hours before I get seen, that is a problem, and people are not seeing that because for whatever reason they're not living that life. But I can make the connection very clearly. The problem, the reason why we have such a problem with the health system in the Black community is because, one, the charges are ridiculously high, and two, we can't expect people who are living below the poverty line to be able to pay the same amount as someone who is well-to-do for procedures and things like that that are already overpriced. And I also briefly mentioned that people can't get jobs because they have records on their account. And that's another problem that I think people really need to attack, because one, I don't condone violence, and I think if you do a crime, you should go to jail. But I also do have a lot of friends who it is cheaper for them to actually go to jail than fight a case, even though they know they are innocent, because they don't have the money to pay for a lawyer. They don't have the money to bail themselves out. And so you put all these people in the system where you're constantly asking them for more money. They don't have any more money. And the only other option is to spend time in jail, get a criminal record, which we know leads to issues with getting jobs down the road, which leads to discrimination. And all of that plays a role into why there's such a health disparity within the Black community itself. And I think instead of, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but the whole idea of defunding the police, and that is part of the thing that we're all trying to get to, is instead of constantly giving money to the police departments, we need to be funding local clinics. We need to be funding hospitals so that people of color, minorities, anyone who really needs medical assistance can do it and not feel like it's a financial burden to get that type of assistance. So that's just, a piece that I would like to add in there, because I think a lot of people, when they hear defunding the police, they think, oh, well, there's so much crime, there's all of this going on, why would we defund the police? And it's because if we're doing work that is proactive, like actually getting people counseling, like actually getting people therapy, like actually getting people affordable health care, a lot of the crimes that we're experiencing, it will probably diminish. And people need to actually sit back and try to soak that all in and try to understand that concept a little bit.
My understanding of the defund the police movement is that it's not at face value as you described it. It's a matter of reassigning resources into preventative roles so that the need for police react is different. And I put that out to all three, Jojo and to Shante. Can you elaborate more on that, Jojo?
First, I'd like to talk about the healthcare system. So part of my commitment is educating myself, and I have a very special wife that knows a lot of stuff about healthcare, and I don't like to pay for insurance and stuff like that, because when we used to have insurance, you try and call the doctor and, oh no, you gotta wait. We can't cover that. Well, we gotta get a second look. So now we just pay. Now we just pay out of pocket, and you do other things like going to wellness doctors. People that aren't, say, just sitting in the hospital waiting for patients to come in. You seek out the people that are looking to do alternative medicine and stuff like that. But I mean, that's, so me personally, I don't, like when they had the Obama funding, you pay the fine and you just pay the fine and make sure you find a doctor that you can work with and stuff like that. So I got a different take on the healthcare. So is this thing still acting up?
Freeze a little bit, but you're still there. We hear you fine. Dr. Delalu, do you want to address that too?
Well, I'm just looking at the time. Are we due to end at 12:30?
We are.
So maybe we should just all get a round of closing remarks. I think that would be important.
Okay, please.
So let me first thank everyone for coming. I know this is a difficult topic and it's certainly an important one. Thank the Alumni Association for making the space for us to engage on this topic. Thanks for the questions that came in. So, I've committed my life to this work. It's hard work. And so what I would say as we leave today, that this is the beginning of a conversation. We need to absolutely continue to educate ourselves on what's happening. We can't, when I was in Maine, it was told to me that you could spend your whole life in Maine and never engage with a Black person, right? My roommate was 18 years old. I was the first Black person that she ever met. So that's the reality. I know this is an alumni event, so people are all over the country, in the world. What I'm saying is we can stay insulated in our own communities and kind of turn off what's happening right around us. And so the call to action really is first and foremost, acknowledge that it's real. The country, unfortunately, if you look at the census, the first census was done in 1790. And in that census, one of the questions was around race, right? So we've been talking about race in this country for a long time. You could check off that you were white. You could check off Indian, but you were not counted. So Indians were not taxed, and slave, right? And that was 3/5. Why was it 3/5? Because of the compromise. The Southern slave owners didn't want to pay full tax on their property. What was that property? Individuals, humans, right? And so from the beginning, we talked about Black people as being property. If one of the things that, if you have time after you get off of this webinar and you feel excited and you need more information, watch the documentary 13th by Ava DuVernay. It's available on Netflix if you have a Netflix account, but it talks about this history, because what happens is we separate it. We have to stop separating these issues as isolated incidents. There's a political, economic, social, and cultural component that ties it all together. And so I've taken up a lot of time, but I really appreciate this. This is important to me. I began a lot of this work in Maine, and I'll continue it for the rest of my career. And I'll turn it over to the other panelists to share their remarks.
Thank you.
You want me to go first, Jojo? Or John?
Sure, please.
Yeah, so I will second that thank you. And it's just, I would say that I appreciate the opportunity to be heard and the opportunity to have everyone kind of listen. And I do want to go back on one question before I leave. And that's, well, what can white people do who are trying to be a part of this? And one thing that I've noticed and that's happened to me is I've had friends who reach out to me and say, hey, I see what's going on. Are you okay? And, my response to that is, what's going on? And because that's the very problem right there. People are so uncomfortable to actually say, hey, I see the systemic racism going on. Are you okay? That they won't even acts about it when they're showing showing that they care, basically. And so my biggest thing is or my biggest message is to, one, be okay with being uncomfortable. This is a very uncomfortable topic to talk about because, one, whenever we talk about race, for white people, it's almost that feeling of shame and guilt, knowing that, that people that look like them did something that's horrible to people that look like us. But we're not talking about you specifically. We're talking about racism in general in the system that is still here today. And so people need to not take it personally, first of all, but also not be afraid to talk about it. And another thing I want to briefly mention is I've noticed that it's a trend on Facebook to immediately unfriend somebody who they believe is racist or who has an opposite view, such as all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter. And my response to that is not what we need to be doing. We should not be unfriending these people. If anything, this is our opportunity to, okay, listen to what they have to say, but also educate them and say, well, this is why we're saying what we're saying. I think to unfriend them and to exclude them and to say, well, never mind all of the beautiful friendships that we had, this one moment just makes me think that you're a terrible person. I think that's a bad approach. And I think by excluding people and shutting them out, we're actually creating a group of people who will talk internally and continue this hate that we don't know about, as opposed to being their friends and having that conversation openly. And so that's just what I want to leave out there, is to just be open and comfortable with being uncomfortable about the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Jojo, any closing remarks?
I'll be quick because I like to, I like to motivate people. My whole thing is just not giving up. Don't give in. Don't lose your hope, your faith. And, when things around you are going bad, stick up for other human beings, not just Black people, not just white people, this is humanitarian things that we need to do. We need to stick up for one another, regardless of the color of your skin, and don't allow hatred to be around you. Don't allow people to discriminate. If we all take a step and or put both of our feet down, and hopefully we can stop this. I mean, I know it's going to take a while, but one person at a time, and we'll get through this.
Thank you.
I just feel, so I know we've over time. I feel
Oh,
compelled.
don't worry. Go ahead.
I feel compelled to say one more quick thing. For anyone who identifies as Black on the call, for your own mental health, if you do have to turn it off or cut, or I respect Jean's position, but as a mother, this was too heavy for me to be engaging with people and trying to educate them at the same time. So I'm gonna say, you allow yourself to turn people off. Your health and the safety of your family, in my opinion, is first and foremost. And when you feel like you have that energy and you want to go back, then that's fine. But we got to protect our health. We really do. It's traumatic. To watch a person die is traumatic. To watch a person who looks like you die because of the color of their skin is even more traumatic. And so we're all hurting. And sometimes you do need to walk away from people who unfortunately say things that can be hurtful and continue to not really educate themselves around the issue. I know ignorance is real. We do want to give people a chance to learn and educate themselves, but we also have to safeguard our own hearts and our spirits so that we are in a place where we can do the work for many more years to come.
I also agree with you.
Well, this has been an important discussion, and it's not going to, it should not be something that ends here. Let me tell you what the Alumni Association is planning to do. This issue is a priority to the Alumni Association. It's part of our strategic plan, and in terms to engage on tough issues. And we have the ability to be the great convener of difficult issues, and we plan to do that and to address the issues of the university and of our members. One of the things that we're doing is we're putting together a resource page that's going to take advantage of information that our panelists will share with us, things that are in publications, both popular and scholarly, resources tying in with the university. For example, I know the university has some great resources available. So we'll be sharing all of that information with everybody who registered for this, for today's event, so that you'll have that. But it is a topic, a series of topics that we'll be coming back to. And I'm really grateful that so many people took an interest in participating today. Incredibly grateful to our three panelists and to President Perini Mundy for being part of this as well, and to all of you who have shared questions with us. So thank you, be safe, take care of yourselves and take care of others, and we'll be in touch with you for additional resources. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.